It is a curious contradiction of our age. Never before has humanity possessed such immense knowledge, and yet never before have we felt so disoriented by it. We can land robots on Mars, decode the genome of entire species, and stream conversations across the planet in seconds, yet we still wage war, still struggle with meaning, and still feel deep in our bones that something is missing, that something enormous is on the horizon, shifting beneath our feet, and we are not prepared for it. We have advanced technologically, yes, but advancement in machinery is not always accompanied by advancement in wisdom. Our tools have outpaced our understanding, and our screens, those glowing rectangles we stare into, have become both mirrors and blindfolds. They reflect our genius and simultaneously our disconnection. We are more connected than ever digitally, but often more estranged emotionally. And in this paradox, something stirs, a realization that change is not just coming, it's already happening. Not out there among the stars, but within us. We speak often of climate change, political unrest, economic instability, all real, all pressing, but these are not isolated storms. They are surface ripples of a much deeper tectonic shift, a shift in consciousness itself. Not mystical, not supernatural, but evolutionary. As real as gravity, but harder to measure. As pervasive as dark matter, but only just beginning to be understood. You see, evolution is not just the story of bones and biology. It is a story of awareness, of perception expanding beyond instinct. Life on Earth has undergone countless transformations, chemical, biological, geological. But what if the next great shift is neither chemical nor physical, but psychological, philosophical? What if the next leap is in how we see ourselves, how we relate to one another, and how we define what it means to be human in a universe that has no obligation to explain itself? Throughout history, moments of great awakening follow periods of great uncertainty. The Renaissance emerged from the Black Death. The Age of Reason followed centuries of superstition. And perhaps today, amid our existential anxiety, a new frontier is opening not outward into space, but inward into self-awareness. This is what some have called the shift, a transformation not marked by flags or borders, but by the subtle but unmistakable evolution of the human spirit. A quiet revolution that is already underway, and perhaps, just perhaps, it is the most important transition our species has ever faced. But are we ready? The signs are everywhere if you know where to look. A surge in interest in mindfulness, meditation, inner healing, a societal reckoning with long-buried trauma, a new generation questioning systems we once accepted without thought. People waking up not in a spiritual trance, but in the sobering recognition that the way we've lived rooted in fear, division, and scarcity is unsustainable. This shift is not a prophecy, it's a pattern, one etched into the cosmos itself. Stars are born from collapse, galaxies are forged in chaos. Even our own planet, with its molten heart and fragile crust, teaches us this lesson. Upheaval is a prerequisite for transformation. And now, here we are caught between what was and what could be, between the familiar gravity of the known and the strange pull of the unknown. And that is precisely what makes this moment so precarious. Because transformation, true transformation, requires more than belief. It demands responsibility. Responsibility for our thoughts, our systems, our relationships, our place in the grand story of the universe. We've long treated consciousness as a byproduct of biology, something that emerged accidentally, like steam rising from boiling water. But what if we've had it backwards? What if consciousness is not the result of matter, but the sculptor of it? What if awareness is the very thread that stitches reality together, not just here on Earth, but across the entire cosmic tapestry? These are not mystical musings. They are frontier questions in physics, neuroscience, and cosmology. As quantum theory bends our understanding of time and causality, as we discover that observation itself influences outcomes, we must ask, what role do we play? Not as spectators of the universe, but as participants in its unfolding? Dolores Cannon, whose work has stirred curiosity and controversy alike, spoke of a coming shifta leap, not of faith, but of vibration, of frequency. Now, I'm not here to endorse every metaphysical claim. Science demands skepticism, but science also demands open-mindedness. And when hundreds, thousands of people across time and culture begin describing the same phenomenon in a world more harmonious, more unified, more attuned, perhaps we owe it to ourselves to listen, if only as a thought experiment. What if this new Earth is not a destination, but a reflection, a mirror of the choices we make now? What if the reality we're entering depends not on technology, but on intention? You can feel it, can't you? That something is off, that our old modes of existence, extracting, consuming, dominating, no longer align with the deeper rhythm of the world. That we are out of tune, not with a supernatural deity, but with the very physics of sustainability, of interdependence, of energy transfer and systemic balance. Nature knows this balance intimately. Every ecosystem is an orchestra, each species an instrument. But humanity, in its haste to play solo, has drowned out the symphony. The result? Climate collapse, mass extinction, emotional burnout, not punishment but consequence. And now the Earth our only home, our fragile spaceship, hurtling through spaces, sending signals. Heat waves, floods, pandemics, unrest, not as vengeance, but as feedback. Systems theory would call this a correction, a recalibration toward equilibrium. But here's the problem. We keep trying to fix the symptoms without addressing the cause. We invent smarter phones, but lose the art of conversation. We build taller buildings, but hollow out our communities. We treat loneliness with pharmaceuticals instead of presence. We treat the planet as a machine instead of a living system. The real shift requires something harder than innovation. It requires transformation. And transformation doesn't begin in policy or politics, it begins in perception. So, I ask you, what if we've been measuring progress by the wrong yardstick? What if GDP is not the ultimate measure of success? What if consciousness, not consumption, is the true frontier? In every galaxy, stars collapse and are reborn, nebulas swirl with potential, planets shatter and coalesce. And here, on this tiny speck of dust, orbiting a medium-sized star in the outer spiral arm of an ordinary galaxy, something miraculous is happening. We are beginning to question who we are, why we are, and what kind of world we want to leave behind, not just technologically, but spiritually, ethically, cosmically. This is only the beginning. You see, the most important revolutions are not televised. They don't arrive with banners or breaking news. They happen quietly, like the gradual erosion of stone by water, or the turning of a season. And the revolution we face now is not one of governments or economies. It is a revolution of awareness, a tectonic shift in the landscape of the mind. And though it may appear subtle at first glance, it is beyond all definitions cosmic in scope. What Dolores Cannon articulated through her decades of hypnotic regression and personal testimony may not line up with the scientific method, but it does echo something science is beginning to understand, that perception shapes experience, that belief influences biology. That intention, once thought irrelevant in a cold, indifferent universe, may in fact be one of the fundamental drivers of behavior at both the personal and planetary level. We cannot ignore that hundreds of our clients, without knowing each other, described similar visions, a world where humanity lived not in conflict with nature, but in concert with it, where fear was no longer the prime motivator, where individuals remembered, not just intellectually, but viscerally, that they are part of something larger, something vast and intelligent and beautifully ordered. Now, from a scientific perspective, this doesn't mean we've discovered an alternate dimension or verified a new Earth through double-blind experiments. But it does beg the question, if so many people are experiencing the same pattern of insight, could we be witnessing not a hallucination, but an emergent signal? Not evidence of fantasy, but of a deep human longing breaking through the noise of modern life? And what if that longing, the yearning for connection, for meaning, for truth is not a flaw in the human psyche, but a compass? What if it's pointing us towards something real? We are creatures evolved to survive. But we are also creatures evolved to wonder. Our brains did not stop growing once we learned to wield fire or till soil. They expanded in complexity as we began to ask more abstract questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What does it mean to be conscious in a universe where everything else seems unconscious? These are the same questions that echo across cultures, religions, and philosophies. From Sufi mystics to subatomic physicists, from indigenous wisdom to modern neuroscience, the same thread is pulled, that reality is more than what we can touch, that the seen and the unseen are intertwined, that the act of observation, whether it's gazing at the stars or reflecting on the cell shapes, both the observer and the observed, this is not wishful thinking. It is a cornerstone of quantum mechanics. At the smallest scales of matter, particles behave differently when observed. Consciousness, in some yet unmapped way, alters behavior. And while we haven't unified physics with consciousness in a single equation, we are edging closer to acknowledging what many ancient teachings already embraced, that reality is participatory. In other words, you are not a passive passenger on this planetary ride. You are a co-author, a collaborator, a pixel in the grand hologram that is life. But we've been told otherwise, conditioned otherwise. From early on, most of us are taught to conform, not to question, to repeat, not to explore. We are told that worth is measured by productivity, that value is assigned by status, that success is defined by accumulation. These are the doctrines of the old earth, and they are unraveling. You can see it in the eyes of a child who asks why the oceans are choking in plastic. You can hear it in the voice of the elder who no longer recognizes the world they helped build. You can feel it in the quiet ache of your own heart when the busyness stops and the silence begins. This, too, is part of the shift. Because before we can enter a new paradigm, the old one must first be seen clearly and let go. Not with judgment, but with maturity. Not with rebellion, but with evolution. Dolores Cannon spoke of 3 waves of souls volunteers who came to Earth with a mission. Not to dominate, not to convert, but to assist, to anchor light, to model what the new frequency of being looks like in human form. Now, from a strictly scientific angle, the notion of volunteer souls raises obvious questions. But let's suspend disbelief for a moment and consider it metaphorically. What if these waves simply represent the emergence of new patterns of consciousness across generations? What if what she called volunteers are simply those among us born with a natural resonance toward empathy, cooperation, and non-violencina due to some mystical contract, but due to a shift in the informational field we all share? In this light, the idea of waves becomes a poetic representation of statistical probability consciousness expressing new archetypes across time. The first wave, those who felt alienated in a world driven by survival and dominance. The second, those who began healing trauma, awakening creativity, and redefining identity. The third, those being born now, with neural architectures wired differently, more sensitive, more intuitive, more globally minded. What Dolores framed in metaphysical terms may in fact reflect real evolutionary and sociological shifts. The truth is, we are witnessing a mutation of meaning, a redefinition of identity, not as a solitary ego, but as part of a larger ecological and psychological system. And such shifts are not unprecedented. Consider the Copernican revolution. Once, the Earth was believed to be the center of the universe. The idea that we orbited the sun was heretical until it became obvious. And then the paradigm changed, not just in science, but in consciousness. What we're experiencing now may be the next Copernican moment, not of astronomy, but of inner space, a radical reframing of our place, not just in the cosmos, but in each other's lives. And like every major shift, it will not be comfortable. Change rarely is. That's why it's called a disruption. That's why caterpillars turn to mush inside the cocoon before becoming butterflies. That's why forests burn before new growth appears. The laws of thermodynamics and the cycles of biology teach us that transformation involves release. Energy must move. Old systems must decay to make space for new ones. So yes, things may appear chaotic, politically, economically, environmentally, but what if this isn't the end of the world, but the beginning of a new one? What if the breakdowns we see are necessary precursors to breakthroughs we cannot yet imagine? What if we are not being punished, but prepared? Prepared for what exactly? For a reality where competition yields to collaboration, where intelligence is measured not by test scores, but by emotional depth, where power is not the ability to control others, but to master oneself, where our definitions of success shift from accumulation to alignment. Such a reality will not arrive by decree. It cannot be downloaded or voted into existence. It must be cultivated one mind at a time, one heart at a time, one choice at a time. And this is where you come in, because the future is not an abstract construct. It is a mirror of the present. Your thoughts, your actions, your courage to choose love over fear, these shape the terrain of tomorrow more than any law ever will. Dolores Cannon called it the new earth. I call it a possibility, a probability curve waiting for enough momentum to become inevitable. A harmonic resonance that, once strong enough, collapses the waveform of chaos into coherence. The question is not, is it coming? The question is, will we meet it? Will we meet it with open minds or closed fists, with curiosity or cynicism, with the humility of explorers or the arrogance of rulers? We've been told that survival belongs to the fittest, but evolution tells a more nuanced story. In nature, the species that endure are not always the strongest, but the most adaptable. The ones that learn to collaborate, to co-regulate, to find balance within a system of relationships. Trees that share nutrients through underground fungal networks. Wolves that protect the pack. Birds that migrate in geometric unity. Resilience is not a solo act. It is a chorus. And here we are, 8 billion voices on one tiny rock floating in a cosmic ocean. Some of us whispering peace, some shouting fear, but the harmony we seek cannot be imposed. It must be chosen. Not once, but again and again, in the smallest of moments, in the kindness to a stranger, in the courage to speak truth, in the pause before we react. These are not small acts. They are quantum acts, subtle shifts that ripple through the field of human consciousness. In physics, this is known as non-locality. That one action, taken with intention, can affect the system as a whole, no matter the distance. So if you think you're insignificant, think again. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean condensed into a drop. A single point of consciousness through which the universe is learning itself. Your awareness is not isolated. It is entangled. Your choices shape not only your life, but the probability landscape of our shared future. And that future depends on whether we can rise above the gravitational pull of our old narratives. Narratives that say, I am separate, I must compete, I must win, even if others lose. These beliefs have fueled centuries of conflict. But they are not laws of nature. They are habits of thought. And like any habit, they can be unlearned. In fact, we're beginning to see this unlearning across every field. Neuroscience shows us that the brain is plastic, capable of reprogramming itself even late in life. Epigenetics reveals that our environment and mindset can influence gene expression. Systems theory teaches that small changes in one part of a system can lead to dramatic changes in the whole. Even cosmology reminds us that the universe, despite its apparent chaos, is governed by patterns, fractal geometries, golden ratios, elegant equations that hint at an underlying order. So why would human consciousness be the exception? Perhaps what Dolores Cannon called the shift is simply a phase transition like water turning to steam, or carbon compressing into diamond, a change in state catalyzed not by force, but by pressure. Pressure from within and without. Pressure created by the realization that the way we've been living no longer serves the potential of who we could be. We are the only known species capable of contemplating its own extinction, and also the only species capable of preventing it. But to do so, We must evolve not just technologically, but ethically. Not just structurally, but spiritually. And here's the paradox. To evolve upward, we must first go inward. This is where ancient wisdom meets modern science. Meditation is now shown to alter brain waves, reduce inflammation, increase compassion. Breathwork affects the autonomic nervous system. Gratitude rewires the neural default mode. Practices once dismissed as woo-woo are being validated in laboratories. And yet, we still hesitate. We still wait for external permission to change. Why? Because change requires not just insight, but integration. You can have a glimpse of the new earth in a dream, a conversation, a moment of stillness. But to live there too, build your home in that frequency, requires work. Inner work. The work of healing trauma, of questioning beliefs, of forgiving what was so you can create what could be. Dolores Cannon often emphasized the importance of releasing old baggage, energetic, emotional, ancestral. She spoke of frequency as the key to this new world, that those anchored in fear and control cannot pass through the gateway, not because they are unworthy, but because their frequency is incompatible. This idea may sound esoteric, but it finds echoes in physics. Energy systems must match frequencies to resonate. Radio receivers don't pick up all signals, only the ones they're tuned to. So too, the future we experience will depend on what we are tuned into. Are we broadcasting anxiety, division, scarcity? Or are we tuning into clarity, compassion, coherence? This is not magical thinking, it's electromagnetic reality. Your heart has a measurable field that extends meters beyond your body. Your brain emits waves that synchronize with those around you. Group meditation has been shown to reduce violence in cities. Emotion, thought, intention, these are not abstract forces. They are real data streams that influence the biofield of Earth itself. And Earth too is responding. Have you noticed? The increasing volatility of weather, the magnetic field anomalies, the growing sensitivity of both humans and animals. We are not separate from this planet. We are its nervous system, its mind, its voice, and the Earth is not simply reacting to pollution, it is reflecting our collective state of being. As within, so without. This is why the shift cannot be postponed, because it is not scheduled, it is emergent. It rises from our choices, moment to moment, breath by breath, and it demands that we stop waiting for saviors or solutions to descend from the sky. We are the response we've been waiting for. The shift is not a portal, it is a practice. It's waking up in the morning and choosing not to numb yourself with distraction. It's speaking truth when silence would be easier. It's taking care of your body, not for vanity, but for vibrational clarity. It's listening deeply, loving courageously, creating beauty even when the world feels ugly. And no, this will not be easy, because the old world is seductive. It rewards conformity. It celebrates competition. It sells you fear dressed as freedom. But it is collapsing not because it was evil, but because it was incomplete. We built skyscrapers, but forgot how to sit in silence. We conquered mountains, but lost our reverence for mystery. We decoded the genome, but still struggle to love ourselves. So now, the invitation is clear. Not to escape the Earth, but to remake it. Not through domination, but through awakening. Not by waiting, but by becoming. Because when enough of us remember who we really are, not roles or resumes, but consciousness made manifest, the shift will no longer be a theory or a hope. It will be our lived reality. The new Earth is not out there. It begins here. And yet, we hesitate. Even now, on the edge of a new horizon, many of us still clutch the remnants of the old, not because we believe in them, but because they are familiar. Because certainty, even when flawed, feels safer than the unknown. But here's the catch. Growth only begins where comfort ends. If you've ever seen a snake shed its skin or watched a seed break open to sprout, you understand this truth viscerally. Transformation requires rupture, not violence, but release. The old self, the old society, the old story must be allowed to unravel, not in despair, but in trust that something wiser is emerging through the unraveling. Dolores Cannon understood this, not as dogma, but as pattern, as the same arc that governs stars and cells and civilizations. Her work wasn't about convincing you of other worlds, it was about reminding you that the only world that needs changing is the one between your ears. And science, if honest, agrees. All observation is filtered through perception. What we call reality is already a blend of data and interpretation. Color is not a property of the object, it's how your brain translates wavelengths. Time is not absolute, it bends and dilates, depending on speed and gravity. Even mass, under the right conditions, vanishes into probability fields. The universe is not fixed, it is fluid, responsive, alive. So the question isn't, is the new Earth real? The question is, what are you willing to become in order to see it? The shift doesn't promise utopia. It doesn't bypass pain. In fact, it often amplifies discomfort because it brings your shadows into the light. The parts of yourself that you've hidden, denied, repressed, they will rise, not to shame you, but to free you. Trauma is not weakness. It is unintegrated wisdom. Pain is not punishment. It is a signal your psyche asking for alignment. We were taught to suppress, to soldier on, to distract, but healing begins the moment you stop running. When you sit still long enough to listen to your breath, your body, your own unmet needs, something remarkable happens. Coherence begins to return. Like static resolving into music. Like a fog lifting from the mountain. This coherence is not just emotional, it's physiological. The heart and brain, when in harmony, create electromagnetic patterns that influence every cell. When your nervous system calms, your perception widens. You respond rather than react. You create rather than consume. And this inner coherence is contagious. It ripples outward. Families change. Communities shift. Systems evolve not from the top down, but from the inside out. This is how revolutions happen. Not always with fire and flags, but with frequency. With enough people choosing presence over panic, integrity over image, wholeness over hustle, because the real power in this universe isn't control, it's resonance. And the most powerful force in human life is not force at all, it's alignment. Alignment with your values, alignment with your nature, alignment with the deeper intelligence that has been whispering to you all along. Call it source, call it the universe, call it quantum probability fields. Whatever the name, the function is the same: to guide evolution forward, to sculpt chaos into complexity, to draw life toward more life. And well, with our opposable thumbs and curious minds here, the latest experiment in that unfolding. We are the universe becoming conscious of itself, which means our pain, our joy, our confusion, our clarity, it all matters. It all contributes to the larger story. So, what kind of story do you want to write? One of fear clinging to control? Or one of courage creating coherence? Because the shift is not optional. It is already in motion. The only question is whether you will fight it or flow with it. Resistance is easy. It's what our nervous system is trained to do. But resistance consumes energy. It drains vitality. Flow, on the other hand, generates power. And the fastest way to enter flow is not to chase pleasure, but to pursue truth. And truth, inconvenient as it may be, is liberating. The truth is, you are not powerless. The truth is, your choices echo across the field. The truth is, survival was never the goal. Thriving is. And thriving requires connection. Connection to self, to others, to the cosmos that birthed you. Connection doesn't mean agreement. It doesn't mean perfection. It means awareness, curiosity, the willingness to stay open when it's easier to shut down. This openness is the mark of true intelligence. The universe itself is open, constantly expanding, exploring, rearranging. The moment we harden into certainty, we fall out of sync with the very force that sustains us. And so we return again to the shift, not a moment in time, but a mode of being, not a light switch, but a sunrise. Subtle at first, then undeniable. until one day you wake up and realize you are no longer who you were. The fears that gripped you have loosened. The questions that haunted you have softened. The world, once rigid and gray, now shimmers with a strange new light. That is what it means to survive the shift. Not to escape pain, but to integrate it. Not to deny darkness, but to shine in spite of it. Not to wait for rescue, but to remember you are the one you've been waiting for. If this planet is a classroom, then the shift is the final exam, not in the sense of judgment, but in the sense of readiness. Are we prepared to graduate beyond primitive patterns of dominance and fear? Are we prepared to move beyond tribal boundaries and inherited ideologies, beyond the illusion of separation that tells us falsely that we are alone? We are not alone. We never were. Not in the universe, not in the story of life, not in this moment of transformation. We are surrounded by ancestors, by ecosystems, by particles vibrating in coherent symphony, by stars that burned their lives away just so we could have carbon in our bones and oxygen in our lungs. The shift is not a test of your intelligence, your wealth, your status. It is a test of your capacity to remember that the atoms in your blood were born in the core of a dying star. To remember that this planet is not something you live on, it is something you are made of. To remember that consciousness, the mysterious force animating your mind, is not limited to your skull. It is part of a field, a network, a universe that thinks, feels, adapts. And if this is true, if the cosmos is not dead matter, but living process, then we are not here to conquer nature. We are here to collaborate with it. This collaboration starts small, with breath, with honesty, with the courage to dismantle false beliefs, not in rage, but in reverence. The courage to see clearly, even when it's uncomfortable. The courage to choose love, not as an emotion, but as an orientation, a discipline, a gravitational force that pulls us toward wholeness. That is the vibration of the new earth. Not perfection, but integrity. Not escape, but embodiment. Not someday, but now. We are not waiting for another savior, another system, another sign in the sky. We are the sign. We are the system. We are the spark that could ignite an entire world's awakening or dim into extinction if we ignore the call. Look around. The signs are already here. Youth rising up for the planet. Elders sharing forgotten wisdom. Scientists and shamans beginning to speak a common language. Walls falling. Truth surfacing. Hearts breaking not to end us, but to open us. This is the shift. Not a fantasy, not a fad, but a frequency that is asking everything in you to rise. So rise, even if your voice trembles, even if your path is unclear, even if the world tells you to sit back down, rise like gravity no longer owns you. Rise like the sun is something inside you. Rise because this world needs not more opinions, but more presence. Not more noise, but more light. You don't need to know everything to take the next step. You don't need to see the whole map to take the next breath. You only need to remember this. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe becoming aware of itself, and in that awareness lives all the wisdom you'll ever need. To survive the shift is not just to endure it, it is to participate in it, to shape it, to carry the light of understanding through the dark corridors of a species still finding its way home. We are not ready for what is about to happen because it is unlike anything that has ever happened, but we are here for it, and that means everything. The future is watching, the cosmos is listening, and the earth, dear earth, is waiting for us to remember. Now breathe and begin.